Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 18th, 2008. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. Well, this week it's all about you. What's your beef? A long time ago, I asked you to send in your pet peeves about what non-beer people say about beer. In this episode, Steve and I dig into the mailbox archive and bring those letters to light. Well, if you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. And as usual, you can follow me on Twitter, my username, Basic Brewing. All one word. The 2009 Brewer's Logbooks and the Introduction to Wine Kits DVDs are both here. Check out the online store at basicbrewingshop.com to find them. And we've got a new episode of our new video podcast, Basic Winemaking Video, which you can find on iTunes and basicwinemaking.com. The second episode was posted this week, Mulled Wine with Geeky Gadgets. So we're easing into the technical side of winemaking. And you guys are just wearing out the Amazon.com link on our site, and I appreciate that greatly. If you do your Christmas shopping on Amazon.com, or, it works throughout the rest of the year too, please don't forget to click on the Amazon Associate link. It's a little Amazon logo on basicbrewing.com before doing that, and you'll be helping us out. Thanks very, very much, as always, to those who keep us in mind. And I read a couple of examples of what's been purchased on the site at the end of the program every week, for those of you who skip the end. You definitely don't want to skip the end this week. A little surprise at the end of the show. One program note, I'm going to take next week off because it's going to be Christmas. I got these kids and this wife. They want to see me and stuff, so I'm going to take next week off. So this is the last episode of 2008. It's been a great year, and I appreciate the help of everybody who we've interviewed over the past year. And I appreciate you guys for sticking with us and helping to spread the word about good beer and home brewing throughout the world. I know a lot of better beers being brewed because of it all. So thanks, everybody. Now let's read some email. Danny in Gainesville, Florida writes, regarding the person who wondered about blow-off tubes and better bottles, I strongly suggest picking up a foam control agent like FirmCap S or Defoamer 105 instead, which are available at most of the major online homebrew stores and maybe even at your local shop. A few drops prevent boilovers as well as excessive krausen during fermentation, making blow-off losses a thing of the past. The cost is only a few cents per batch, and there doesn't seem to be any negative impact on head retention whatsoever. Danny says keep it in the fridge, and it'll stay good for months or longer. I can't recommend it highly enough. Well, very good. Thanks, Danny. I've been wondering about that stuff lately. I haven't tried it myself, but I had an email from a listener who was wondering if it actually worked. And that may be another thing that I'll have to add to my home brewing arsenal, especially when I'm brewing wheat beers, which always seem to go crazy on me and when I kind of crawl out of the carboy for some reason. John from Bangor, Maine writes, I just listened to your October 9th episode of the audio podcast where you were giving advice to the guy with exploding bottles. Very recently, I came home to find that as a result of eyeballing the amount of DME, that's dry malt extract, I used to prime instead of measuring it, I had 5 exploded bottles in my closet. John says I immediately moved the surviving 45 bottles into the fridge and have been serving them to every person that's come into my apartment since. That was about 2 months ago, and I just finished off the last bottle from that batch last night. Once in the fridge, there was not a single more explosion, so the cold definitely helped. As far as the beer being overcarbonated, I found that so long as I poured it into a glass and let it sit about 10 minutes before drinking it, the carbonation levels were fine. And John says, I learned 2 things from this. Cold will prevent future explosions, and always measure the priming sugar. Thanks, John. Yes. Eyeballs are good for a lot of things, but measuring priming sugar is not one of them. This is definitely one area in brewing where it pays to be very accurate when you're priming your beer to go in the bottle. And it makes sense that the cold would put a stop to the explosions. I thought back and just, whenever I make root beer for the kids, you prime that, and refrigerating the bottles after they've reached the proper carbonation levels prevents explosions, even though there's a ton of sugar still left in there for the yeast to eat. The only thing that is you have to keep them refrigerated and don't let them warm up, again, unopened, to be safe. Chris in Denver responds to the letter from Aaron from Louisiana, who is asking the cheapest way to make a big beer. Chris says, it's probably unnecessary, but I feel like responding to the fellow who wanted to brew bigger beers cheaply. I've just recently got my brewing down to a really nice, affordable level. He needs to go all grain. Chris says the initial setup was really affordable. I got a second-hand cooler from my mash tun and fleshed it out for about $15 in parts, so I won't hear any complaints about the price of all grain brewing equipment. Chris says, I bought my base grain through a local grain buy, so it was a good price, and breaks down to about $6 per batch for base malt, and my local homebrew shop will let me use their grain mill as long as I buy my specialty malts, 12 cents per ounce, and hops there. 12 cents per ounce. Oh, per ounce. Okay. Chris says, if he wants to go as cheap as me, he should culture his own yeast as well. That shaves off up to $7 per batch. Dry yeast works really well, too. Chris says, ultimately, he could spend a mint on an all-grain setup, but with a pretty small investment and a frugal eye to what he really needs to do it. Needs to do it right. He can brew even huge beers for way less than $20 a batch. I hear you, Chris. I think for the long term, that's great advice. All grain is definitely cheaper than extract, especially for big beers. And you don't have to have a fancy setup to do all grain well. I mean, that's my setup is, is proof of that. I guess the trick with a very limited budget, maybe just to keep your eye out for pieces of gear here and there. And before long, you may be in business, making cheaper beer. One more letter. Mike from Macomb Township in Michigan writes, some of the hop varieties at my homebrew store are only available as leaf hops. Oh, I'm going to get letters over that. We've covered that. Mike says, I don't like using leaf hops. Let's just say whole hops, because they are messy. My question is whether or not crushing the whole hops into a powder has an adverse effect on the isomerization of the alpha acids. Have you done this before? Is it not recommended? Well, theoretically, I guess you could say that pellet hops are almost crushed into a powder, and it's said that you get better utilization from them than from whole hops because the alpha acids are more accessible to the boil. The only time I've tried something like that was when I put whole homegrown hops into the food processor before dry hopping. But I noticed that there was a lot of waxy yellow residue left in the food processor after I took the hops out. And that's the stuff that you want to go into the beer, not the leafy stuff. So you might try chopping the hops on a cutting board with a knife to try to minimize that as much as possible. But what about it? Did any of you guys out there had any experience chopping or crushing whole hops? If you did and it made a difference, let me know. Drop me a line at james@basicbrewing.com or just use the contact form on basicbrewing.com. As usual, please don't forget to tell us where you're from and check your email address. Now, this was a fun show to record, and I hope it's a fun one to listen to. Steve Wilkes and I recorded this at the end of a long day recently. I started the morning recording the Smoked Beer Show with Chris Colby, and then Steve and I recorded episodes of Basic Brewing Video and Basic Winemaking Video. So, like I say, it was a long day, and that's my excuse if we get a little slap-happy. Well, Steve, welcome back to the studio.
Thanks, James. It's good to be here.
This is our last Basic Brewing Radio of 2008.
Has it been a year again?
It's amazing. It's just silly how fast time's flying.
Yeah. Well,
and we're sipping on our holiday barley wine,
which is quite lovely.
Yeah, and it makes the time go a little quicker. So it's a little time lubricant there. It just slips on down the stream there. Man, if you want to know more about that, check out the episode of Basic Brewing Video where we talk about that. I'm not sure if it's going to be posted by the time they hear this or not.
Yeah, I think this will come before the video.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah. So check it out. Very good.
Yeah.
One more swaller before we... So we're talking about pet peeves.
Who's got them?
I have no idea. Certainly not us. This all started when Andy Sparks, I announced on the show, as I recall, that Andy Sparks said that the word stout is a style, not a description. So, he would say, if people came up to him and said, "Oh, do you make homebrew? Is it good? Is it stout? I don't like stout beers." He would, the hairs would go up on the back of his neck, and he'd say, stout's really a style. It's not really a good description of the beer. So he would try to, educate people that way. So I said, "What's your pet peeve?" And I solicited emails.
And boy, did you get some.
I got some emails. You guys are good. So first of all, the first couple of pet peeves were apparently with Andy's pet peeve. So you can't please people. Dale from Hillsborough, North Carolina said, a note about the term stout. Indeed, as Andy advocates, it is a noun referring to a style of beer. It is also an adjective, which refers to something that is full-bodied, which can very well describe a stout beer if made properly, anyway. I guess to be proper on this, we should say that we're having a stout. After 3 or 4 imperial stouts, one might say that anyway. So,
well, if one could pronounce that after 3 or 4.
Stout.
Well, Nicholas weighs in as well. He says that while stout is definitely a style, it is first and foremost a descriptor. So he takes issue with Andy. So if people want to call a beer stout, and they mean very bold, strong, and or full in body, they're absolutely correct. I can only assume, writes Nicholas, that this is how the style stout got its name. If you don't believe me, take Mr. Webster's word for it. And he provides the definition from Webster's dictionary.
Quite literal, Nicholas is.
Quite literally.
And Andy responds, and I apologize for not having Andy here in person. It's just for scheduling reasons. Andy says, Nicholas, you got me there. Stout certainly is a description, and sometimes it can be a useful one at that. I guess my point is that since in brewing there is a style of ale called stout, it's not a good description of beer in general because it leads to confusion among the uneducated. So I can see that.
Yeah.
As your definition points out, stout does indeed mean strong, but as we all know, the most famous stout in the world is not a very strong beer at all, meaning Guinness, of course.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time talking to folks about beer and beer styles, trying to find out what they like and don't, so I can help them brew beer which they will enjoy. When someone tells me they went to Germany and had a real German lager and it was really stout, I'm left with the following questions. Was it the beer just strong, or was it like a stout in any way? Sometimes I get a response that it was very strong and it kicked my butt. Other times I get that it was black as midnight with a white creamy head. Then I know they had a German Schwarzbier or something like that. Andy says, as James pointed out, I usually say something like, stout is a style, not a description, which usually gets the point across. My goal is to educate and expand people's knowledge of beer and beer styles, not to make fun of them or put them down. I see these encounters as an opportunity to talk about stout, and how it is different from all the other wonderful beer styles in the world. Mm-hmm. So there. He's trying to build bring a little fun and levity, and he's not just putting them down by, saying stout is a right. style, not a description. He doesn't leave it at that. He continues the conversation and helps to educate people who should know a bit more about beer.
And I believe that stout was an offshoot from porter. So you had porter.
Right.
And then eventually you had some folks making something they called stout porter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the two styles diverged. And so you had a style called stout and a style called porter. So actually originally stout would have been a descriptor
mm-hmm.
of a kind of porter.
So there you go. So everybody's right. So we got that taken care of. And I guess the important part of that is if you do run apart, even if someone says something to you that is your pet peeve, you can't react in an irritating way. You've got to smile and kind of bring them into the fold, so to speak.
That's right.
Be patient with the ignorant. I'm really glad when people are patient with me.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
What do you got next? What do we got?
Well, let's see. Paul writes, as for terminology that people use incorrectly, I would like to offer mashing.
Okay.
Most people associate mashing with the whole process prior to lautering, but it is not. Mashing refers only to the act of mixing the water and grain, in other words, mashing in. After that, the remaining time is called the rest.
Well, there you go. And that's Paul Charlesworth, he's the chemistry professor who's been on this show. So he should know. So I've been guilty of that. I've been referring to the mash.
The mash. I mashed for an hour.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I say that all the time.
Well, I guess using mash as a noun would be okay, but using to mash would be less correct.
I mashed in. I rested for an hour.
There you go.
That would be Paul's.
There you go.
Would solve his problem.
So we've learned something there.
Absolutely.
Eric from South Minneapolis says, it drives me up a wall when I see or hear this. Ales, stouts, porters, and nut browns. He says people use ale as its own style. I've seen and heard this a ton of times. To give people the benefit of the doubt, they might be using ale to cover pale ales and IPA. It still bugs me, though. I think this is what confuses people about ales and lagers. And I think he's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had oftentimes people ask me, what kind of beer do you like? Or what kind of beer do you make? Or do you make ales?
Oh, yeah.
Do you make beer or do you make ales? And I say, yes.
Yes.
And then their eyes glaze over as I talk to them about the family tree of beers. But so yeah, there again, you've got to educate people. You got to bring them into the fold,
mm-hmm.
and tell them what how they should be doing it more properly there.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan has a pet peeve. He says, pertaining to your most recent show, the comment that gets me going the most is when someone says something like, "Ooh, it tastes like beer." Which usually is followed by my blank stare for a few minutes, followed by, well, what do you mean by that? Beer tastes like 100,000 different things and more. And I hate it when people use beer as a descriptor.
See, there it is. They're using beer as a descriptor, not only just stout.
Well, I guess if you were like eating an apple pie and you took a bite of the pie and you went, "Ooh, it tastes like beer," that could be a problem.
But then, then they would come back. You would come back and say, "Okay, does it taste like a barley wine?
Do you mean a stout?"
That's right. Is it a lager? Are you talking about a Schwartz beer? Are you talking about a smoked beer? What kind of beer are you talking about? If you're so yeah, and a part of that is the untrained palate.
Well, yeah, that's actually when I share, say, homebrews with my siblings, who are Bud Light drinkers and other light beer aficionados.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring them up a nice pale ale of some kind or a stout or whatever. And they will say things like, "Whoa, that's beer." Like, yeah. That's what beer is supposed to taste like.
But, someone who has never had, say, a cola.
Yeah.
would probably not be able to tell the difference between a Pepsi and a Coke. Right?
Right.
Don't you think?
Or an
or
RC.
Dr. Pepper or an RC. It's brown stuff. Tastes like soda pop. But, to those of us who have been brought up on that sugary stuff, we can tell pretty much instantly if it's a Dr. Pepper. We could probably tell you if it's a Diet Dr. Pepper.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just the training of the palate. And, even my wife, who knows a bit about beer, she knows what she likes, definitely. She likes stouts and porters. She tried our little barley wine, and she said, "That's beer?"
Yeah, she did.
So she thought it tasted more like a mead than a beer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I can see where she gets that.
Yeah.
Sipping on that as we speak.
It's a fruity, less hoppy than other beers.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go. Brian from New London, Minnesota, says, what cheeses me off is when people say, "Oh, you like that dark beer. It's too heavy for me." He says, I don't even argue the issue anymore.
That's one of mine. Actually, that's a pet peeve of mine. It really, really gets me when people prejudge the taste of a beer by its color.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a little bit, same thing with food. I mean, it can be like, oh, I don't like that kind of soup. It's red. Or what, But like a Belgian black lager, very light beer. There's nothing heavy about that style of beer.
Right. You take New Belgium's 1554.
Exactly.
If you were to blindfold somebody and have them drink that, I doubt that they would say that that's as dark a beer as it is.
Yeah.
Because it's not acrid. It's not heavy. And in fact, I think that if you were to blindfold people and have them drink a Guinness, they probably wouldn't say that it was as dark a beer as it is.
Right.
Yeah. The color of the beer doesn't have anything to do with the strength of the beer, doesn't have anything to do with even the roastiness of the beer, or the heaviness of the beer. It's just the color.
It's just the color.
So, again, to educate. That's what we're all about. Is it your turn?
It's my turn.
Is it a U-boat?
Is that a U-boat? Casey says, to contribute to the what non-beer people say question.
This is our friend Hippie Casey.
Hippie Casey. Hey, Hippie Casey. I just recently had this one, and it happens all the time. I got a new job, and my dad said, get a bottle of wine on me to celebrate.
Oh, it's nice.
Yeah, that's very nice of him. So I picked up a New Belgium La Folie instead.
Oh.
Of course, he flipped out at $15 a bottle for a bottle of beer, when I know he would never even question the same amount for wine.
Oh, there you go.
And that's right.
Mm-hmm. A little wine snobbery there.
There is. I experienced that in my own life. And I'll say no more about that.
Yeah, that's right. People wouldn't flinch at paying $35 for a good bottle of wine.
Yeah.
But for, an interesting, sort of unique beer. I mean, we're lucky in that wine nowadays, or beer nowadays, anyone can afford the best beer in the world.
Right.
To buy a bottle of the best beer in the world. If you were to try to buy a bottle of the best wine in the world,
forget about it.
Oh my God. So yeah, and with the prices going up and all that, we're gonna see some bottles of beer that are gonna be more expensive, but you got to put it all into perspective.
Yep.
And I think La Folie is definitely worth $15 a bottle.
Oh yeah, that's mighty good stuff.
So yeah, a little bit of so it's not only people who are just don't know enough about beer. There's people that know a lot about wine, but still have a negative. And it would be interesting to see what Casey's father's perception of La Folie would be if he actually drank it.
He'd probably say it tastes like beer.
I doubt it. I doubt it. If he says that, if he says La Folie tastes like beer, he's been drinking some interesting beers. Chadley from Champaign, Illinois. Well, he's from a town named after a wine.
Yep. I'm from a wine named after a town. I don't know what that means.
I don't either. Chadley says, you were asking for submissions for beer pet peeves. This one makes my blood boil every time I hear it, and thanks to your latest podcast, I got to hear it just 5 minutes ago. This has been a while since he sent this in. He said, I love This is his pet peeve. I love great beer. My favorite beer is Blue Moon. Am I alone in my disdain for this carbonated crystal light that has passed off as craft brew? It is a marker for me in beer conversations. The moment it's mentioned, I know I don't need to listen to anything else that is coming out of that person's mouth in regards to beer. Well, now that's a little snobbery. With no offense to Chadley there, that's a little snobbery on the beer side there.
Maybe a little bit.
Now, I think that when you're talking about going away from the fizzy yellow stuff, I think Blue Moon is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I'd say it is.
Not the best beer in the world.
It's not my favorite beer.
Not the best. Not the best representation of its particular style in the world.
Right.
But it's not swill. Not the worst beer in the world.
Well, no.
Maybe you have other opinions.
I'm not fond of it either. But I intellectually agree that it is not a bad, with parentheses around it, beer.
Here's what I would do, and here's what I actually have done. I was at a beer bar with, my wife and I, Susan and I, were at a beer bar with our friends Kyle and Laura. Mm-hmm. This was ages ago. And Laura, there are tons of taps at this place, and Laura orders a Blue Moon, or is going to order a Blue Moon. And I said, wait a minute. Let's get something. You like Blue Moon. You know you like Blue Moon. You know what that is. Let's get you something else in that style that is more representative of what most beer lovers think is a better style. So we got a Hoegaarden.
Oh, yeah.
So she liked it.
Right.
And she could tell that it was different from, but of course, she made fun of me. But
that's okay.
So maybe the thing is not to come back so strongly on the people who are ignorant, but to say, oh wow, that's a Belgian wit beer. Have you tried, a Hoegaarden, or have you tried Avery White Rascal?
Oh yeah.
Which is also a good representation of the style, or whatever's in your neighborhood. If you can get other wit beers, expose them to those, and kind of help them nudge them into the territory of good beer. Whose turn is this? Is it your turn? My turn.
My turn.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you what Daryl has to say.
Okay.
Daryl says, as a home brewer and craft beer lover, it cheeses me off when someone says that drinking craft beer is just a trendy thing to do, as they're holding the most drank beer in the world.
Who's going with the crowd?
Who's going with the crowd there? And you know what? So what if it's trendy?
That's right. Doggone it. I enjoy being trendy if it's good.
That's right.
And it's not, it's not the biggest trend in the world, obviously, because, craft beer is not the biggest segment.
That's right. Well, and again, to relate back to me, it's all about me anyway.
That's right.
But this happens. I go up, say, at the holidays to visit my family, and I'll bring some nice beers, and everyone will be popping open the Miller Lights, and they'll be looking kind of down their noses at me a little bit, like, well, who do you think you are? It's just trendy. I never thought about it with that word before, but,
So you're just being fashionable.
Being fashionable.
Yeah. It's just a passing thing. Like the internet.
Like a kidney stone. No.
I actually had someone say to me, when the big corporation that I used to work for first had their website online back in the early 90s, someone actually said to me, this internet thing, it's kind of like a passing fad, kind of like CB radio, isn't it? And I said, no. No, because he was thinking of himself. Back in the CB radio, you had a handle, you had a name,
yeah,
and with the internet, you get an email address, or back then it was the AOL username or whatever.
Right.
I guess that was his paradigm.
Well, as Homer Simpson once said, they've got email on the internet now. So
now it's my turn.
Woo.
Ricky, who actually sent us the maple barley one the other day.
Oh, thank you, Ricky.
Says, on the subject of things that irk me as a brewer are people who say that they like wine but will never like beer. I try to explain to them that wine really only has 3 traditional components, water, grapes, and yeast, plus the option of wood-aged or not, whereas beer not only has hops, but steeping grains, adjuncts, and other seasonings, and in so much one could make a beer that some people would even confuse for a wine. They're just so sure that they won't like beer that they will never try it and find out. Well, then that you walk away from those people.
That's right. You just knock the dust off your sandals and leave town. Well, and here, even Susan tastes a barley wine that you made and says, tastes like mead.
Oh, there you go.
We're drinking, remember we had that little dinner party at my house not too long ago, and you brought some new Glarus up, and we had some dyed-in-the-wool, a friend of mine, Susan, not your wife, a different Susan, but she's a dyed-in-the-wool Miller High Life drinker. Loves it.
Not Miller Lite.
No, not Miller Lite, Miller High Life. That's her
champagne
beer.
Of beers.
She drank the new Glarus, both the raspberry and the cherry, and was blown away.
Yeah.
And now she and her husband are planning road trips to Wisconsin, and I'm not kidding. And they both said, this isn't beer.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah. Change people's minds. Your job. Is it your turn?
Is it my turn?
I think it's your turn.
Well, Anthony, I'm not sure where Anthony's from, but he writes...
St. Louis.
Oh, from St. Louis. Location, St. Louis. Been there many times.
I think they make beer there.
They make a lot of beer there. Feeling in a righteous mood, I'd like to share something that happens a lot to me, and probably to every home brewer. People who don't know a lot about the hobby will find out I brew and immediately ask, is it any good? No, it's god-awful. Horrible stuff. That's why I do it. Come on. Usually I just answer, no, not really. You'd better not have any. No beer for you.
No beer for you.
No beer for you 1 year. so
yeah, this is a plain dumb question.
Yeah, it is. Is it any good? What do you? Yeah.
Well, it sounds like a lot of work. Is it any good? Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't have any.
Yeah, no beer for you. 1 year.
Next.
Okay, Nathan. Nate from Denver, Colorado. I have 2 situations. Situation number 1. On a plane, the guy next to me saw me studying for the BJCP test, Beer Judge Certification Program test. And then he asked, do you like light beers or dark beers? Dark beers are too alcoholic for me. Let's see what's over there.
See, this is back to the question about dark being stronger.
See.
And it's a perception.
Yep. Not a reality.
And I want to take issue with a certain large brewery that ran a ad campaign where they showed those dark, heavy imports. Mm-hmm. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure we need to name them.
Yes.
But
it's not dark and heavy like imports.
Like imported beers.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise. And this is from the biggest,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, now they're owned by an imported beer company, so there you go.
There you have it.
What goes around comes around. Number 2. While in Napa Valley taking a wine tour with my wife, we were sampling wine, which
it's a fine thing to do.
Which you may do
on a sunny day
in that situation. All the wine we had tried up to this point had hot alcohol, grapefruit, and black pepper as the dominant flavors. The host was talking about why wine is superior when he explained, beer lacks the complexity of wine. It only has one flavor, beer. And Nate said, I drew another sip and said, wow, grapey. Good for you, Nate.
Oh,
man.
That doesn't even deserve a comment.
No. That's, grapey. Okay. That kind of got my hackles up.
Yeah, that kind of aggravated me. I mean, this is from a professional in the industry who should have a sophisticated palate.
Right.
And, I understand you're selling wine and you're not selling beer, but that's just not an accurate statement in the max.
Yeah. One last one.
This is it. This is the last pet peeve ever.
Or Pez peeve.
Pez peeve.
If you like those small candies
Yeah.
that come out of the necks of those dispensers.
It's an aggravated
Who came up
Pez.
with that? Where you break someone's neck, you bend it over backwards, and candy comes out their throat.
Saddam Hussein.
Oh.
I think that was his.
Well, there you go. The last one comes from Adam in Pella, Iowa.
I love their windows.
Is that where they're from?
I think so.
Could
I
be.
don't know. Who knows?
He says, I have a home brewing term to share that bugs me. Keggle. Keggle.
Kegel.
Keggle. Keg plus kettle equals keggle.
Can you put that in a sentence for me?
I like to brew in my keggle. Keggle. Adam says, this is the 15-gallon commercial keg that has been legally acquired through somebody like Sabco or illegally converted by other means to a brew kettle. Adam says, it drives me nuts because I first learned the word by what a keggle really is. And he spells this time he spelled it K-E-G-E-L.
K-E-G-E-L.
Type it into Google as we speak.
Yeah.
Which I think is pronounced kegel. And look that up. It's making Steve cough.
Excuse me.
He's getting choked up.
I am.
Because a kegel is an exercise that women do to strengthen a certain part of their body. So, again, just look it up. Adam says, if I may rant, don't give me an artsy-fartsy name for it. It's a brew pot or a kettle. Who cares what it's derived from? It's a hunk of stainless steel. Maybe it used to be a hospital bedpan that was remelted and formed into a brew pot for all we know. I don't call my mash tun made from a cooler a mooler, do I?
Well, I hope not, but I've trademarked the name just in case you want to use it.
My mooler.
My mooler.
I'm just going to start using that. Mooler. Well, so there you go. Look up what a kegel is. K-E-G-A-L. No, J-E-K. Oh my gosh. K-E-G-E-L. And get back to me on that.
Thank you, Thigh Master.
You're my only hope. I don't know. So there you go. Those are the pet peeves
of 2008.
Of 2008.
Tell us what your pet peeves of 2009 are.
And we'll eventually get around to reading them.
Yeah. We're probably your pet peeves of 2009, I'm pretty sure by now.
If they've listened this far, hopefully not. My advice to people who, luckily I don't hear much from our critics, if we have critics out there. I hear almost all the email I get is like glowings, and I really, really appreciate that. It just makes us feel great.
Yep.
But my advice to people who don't like us is don't listen.
That's right.
That's my pet peeve. People torturing themselves.
Well, as one stout to another, it's been a great afternoon, James.
And a great year.
Yeah.
And thank you for carrying on this exercise for as long as you have, and thanks to everybody out there who has done it as well. And I've been getting some email from people in the armed services out away from home, whether it's in Germany or Iraq or Afghanistan or Japan or Korea or wherever you guys are. We're thinking of you guys in this holiday season, and hoping that wherever you are, your holiday season is a good one.
That's right.
And that you get to come home soon.
That's right. Come home soon, brew some beer.
Oxen.
Oxen. I think, didn't you mean ollie oxen free?
I meant to say excellent,
well.
But it came out oxen.
Maybe we should go now.
Yeah, we should go now. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, James.
Well, thanks again to Steve. That was a lot of fun. And I want to end this episode with a little holiday cheer from a listener named Roger. And sorry, Roger, I couldn't find where you're from. It's a poem. Cue the music. And by the way, this is Steve playing drums with the Claudia Burson Trio. 'Twas the morn after Christmas. 'Twas the morn after Christmas, and all through the house my homebrew was missing, consumed by some louse. The kegs in the reefer had been sucked dry with malice, and small sooty footprints, they riddled my palace. I checked in the corner, Grand Cru had been taken, but the Coors Extra Gold had all been forsaken. Who was responsible for this gluttonous action? Could it have been Charlie, or perhaps Michael Jackson? I walked back to the fireplace, my mood in a slump, when I noticed my stocking had a generous lump. Out the top, hops were bulging, Hallertauer, Mittelfru, Cascades and Fuggles, East Kent in there too. I had a sneaky suspicion who the culprit might be when my eye caught a glitter from under the tree. A pot, all of stainless, and cane made for racking, confirmed my suspicion as to who'd done the sacking. I decided directly it was that jolly old elf, and that bowl full of jelly didn't appear by itself. Those cheeks oh so rosy were a giveaway, too, a glowing reminder of his taste for home brew. I decided, being Christmas, I'd forgive the fat fellow when I saw in the front yard something twisting and yellow. I looked somewhat closer, and what did I see but thanks for the homebrew in the snow, pinned with P. So from this Christmas forward, my plans, they are clear. I'll exploit Santa's weakness for handcrafted beer. Just send him my wish list, and to clench my vast order, there'll be no milk and cookies, just pretzels and porter. Thanks, Roger. And thanks, Steve and Claudia. Remember, we've got... That's kind of anticlimactic after that. Remember, we've got Brewer's Logbooks and our new Basic Winemaking Introduction to Wine Kits DVD out in our online store. And as usual, if you have any brewing questions, show suggestions, poetry, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our low-tech lagering and decoction mashing DVD, also on basicbrewingshop.com, along with Introduction to Extract Home Brewing and Stepping into All Grain, and our combo deals, and the listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com. And we especially appreciate you guys for hanging with us, helping to support this endeavor. And if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody, as usual, who's continued to click on our Amazon.com link. We appreciate the support. It was tough to pick out the featured products this week. There were a bunch. The winners this week are Scooby-Doo Dynamut Hour, the complete series, and Gastro Anomalies, questionable culinary creations from the golden age of American cookery. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we appreciate your support. That's all. Until next week. Until next year. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.